time we do this, but we are now live, thank goodness, and we are ready to talk about cults in Japan and what that looks like for ministry. I've got several pages of notes that I'm going to be looking at today. And I'm really excited to be talking to you about this because I think it's an area of ministry in Japan and the landscape of Japan that people don't really talk about that much. Especially, when people are getting ready for missions and missionary work, you'll probably take some kind of like comparative religions class, right? You'll talk about Buddhism, you'll talk about Islam, you'll talk about Christianity, and maybe some like occultish stuff, right? There's a really good book called Kingdom of the Cults that goes into a lot of those things. So when we talk about cults and stuff today, I'm not going to be talking about I'm not going to be talking about necessarily, like what an Orthodox Christian would consider a cult, like Jehovah's Witnesses, um, Latter-day Saints, Mormonism. I'm not going to be talking about those. We do have those here, but I'm not going to be addressing those specifically. Today, we are going to be talking primarily about Japanese religions in Japan that are that are relatively new in Japan and what they look like and how they have kind of shaped people's understanding, what that means for the future of ministry in Japan, and what we can do about it. So, we're going to dive into that today. Now, I don't have enough time today to go into all of the nitty gritty details of every single one of these religions. There is just way too much ground to cover in 30-ish minutes. So, first, I want to talk to you a little bit about the overarching ideas behind religion in Japan, some of the history, and then we'll talk about a few of these things that have sprung up, and then we're going to dive into what does that mean for us as we are ministering in Japan and teaching and sharing the gospel. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So first of all, you need to know that Japan is a Shinto and Buddhist country. So Buddhism in Japan is it's like Buddhism in some other places. It was brought into Japan, and I believe around the 700s or 800s. Before that, we had a more animistic belief system called Shinto. Shinto is basically literally translates the way of the gods. And what it is a belief system that basically there's a divine energy, a spirit, or something like that within all of nature. So they will worship all kinds of things, and then they believe that there's kind of like this hierarchy of gods, and there's little gods and goddesses. Buddhism, on the other hand, was imported into Japan and soon after gained a widespread following. This Buddhism was it teaches reincarnation. It teaches that there are different levels, and so people will often do what's called ancestor veneration to try to help their ancestors' spirit not be angry, or to basically rank up in the next life. And you kind of go in this cycle of reincarnation, and you are supposed to basically get better and better and better until you basically become like a Buddha. So that's kind of the overarching scheme of religion and the underlying foundation for religion in Japan. So, in the United States and other Western countries, there's like Christianity, and then there's all these offshoots of that. And then some of them are very cultish, some of them are not, some of them are like a revitalizing of those beliefs. Well, in Japan, it's the same way. So you have the original thought systems and beliefs, and then within Buddhism, you have different sects. So you have like Pure Land Buddhism, you have Nichiren Buddhism, which was started by a guy in like the 1200s, I believe, and they're more aggressive. And a lot of the modern day cults or offshoots and sects would be from that branch that are more aggressive. And you have that, and then you have the Shinto beliefs. And so sometimes you'll have people that are only Buddhist, and they'll say you can't only be Buddhist, you can't be Shinto, and they'll fight back and forth as well, which is very interesting. So, in the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s, they started this thing called secular shrine theory, which they basically said shrines are not involved. They're not actually religious. They're just figures of, they're symbolic of our culture, and they tried to use that to then say the emperor is a god. So like they have a major shrine, and then they created this hierarchy and a structure, and then everything kind of funneled into that. It was abolished after World War II. But, there's all this religious stuff that's actually been going on in Japan for literally hundreds of years. But after the Tokugawa shogunate, and this is, mid to late 1800s, after they pass on power to the emperor system, a lot of people began to take more interest in religion. And part of that was the because the up to that point, you were basically just, you're Buddhist. You're in Japan, you're registered with the temple, you're Buddhist. But then things started to open up a little bit, and people were a little bit more free to think about their things. So there's things called Shinshūkyō, new religions, and then there is Shinshinshūkyō, the new religions, and we're going to talk about those. But before I go into any more details on that, I want to share a couple of resources with you about what you could be looking at. So first off is the Shūkyō Nenkan. This is a publication that is put out every single year by the Japanese government. They put one out every single year, and it contains a lot of stats. It contains history about religious movements in Japan. I was reading through this the other day. I had no idea about this, but originally when the Baptist missionaries came to Japan, the Southern Baptists took the western half, the Northern Baptists took the eastern half. They split the country in half. They talk about all these things in this thing. It's like a 200-page booklet, but it's only available as an electronic format. But because they manage nonprofits and religious nonprofits, they have stats for tons of stuff. And this is a very Japanese thing. Statistics on, which prefectures have how many churches, how many temples, how many registered this, that teachers, etc. How many of them are foreigners, how many of them are not, men, women, etc., etc. So this is very detailed, and I don't have time to go through all 200 pages of this, but I'm pulling some of my information from this. The other thing that I am pulling information from is this book right here. It is called the Christian no Tame no Shinshūkyō Handbook. It's a handbook of various religions for Christians. This is actually pretty old. It was put out in 1995, but it talks about these religious movements. It talks about the other religions, not only Buddhism and Shinto, but also these other offshoots, and it'll give just like a one-line comment about a lot of them as well. So half the book is about like Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, and all that stuff, and then the other half is like Japanese religions, and then the authors provide some Christian perspective on how to engage with those as well. So if you are not familiar with that, if you're coming to Japan or you are in Japan, I highly recommend this book to get you on your feet as a primer. I found it very useful as well. You can get them for pretty cheap online, but that is the book that you need right there. Christian no Tame no Shinshūkyō Handbook, right there. That's the one. So I'm going to be pulling a lot of information from those two today, as well as some various other resources as well. So we talked about the religious movements in Japan. So there's a religious boom, as you call it, right after Japan started opening up to religion. People were no longer just mandatory, you are Shinto, and you are Buddhist. So there were three major religions that came out during that time. One was called, we're going to look at two of them today. One's called Tenrikyo, the other one's called Konkokyo. But just to kind of show you the extent of these religious influences in Japan, I want to show you our city. So this is our city, Nagoya, and our main stations here. The Shinkansen line is running through the middle of the city right there. But I live right around here, and up here is a place called Kanayama. So we're going to go look at Kanayama, and I'm going to go into the street view here. So this is a main station. There's a lot happening in this area. There's two above ground train companies, and then there's the underground train line as well. But I'm gonna go a couple of blocks over here and drop my little guy. We're gonna go for a little walk, and we're gonna drop it right around here. I think this is where it is. Um, Facing the wrong. Oh, here it is. All right. So this building right here with this little gold symbol right here. It says kin. This is Konkokyo. And you can see that they have a pretty big building. 1, 2, 3 stories. They've got a lot of history. They've got a lot of background in Japan. So this is a Shinto based religion that came out. Let's see here. They came out during the 1800s, and they were basically trying to teach a new way of doing Shinto. Um, their Shinto offshoot. They teach there's one creator God, okay? And then they talk about musubi, which is the interconnectedness of all creation and, trying to help people um, with working through this present life. Now, the predominant aspect of the Shinshūkyō that came out during this time period until right before World War II is that they're mostly focused on things of this world. So Japan was very poor at the time, so they're more focused on things this world present needs. That's where a lot of these focus on. But just to show you how influential and how much money and power they've got. So this is near Kanayama, which is one of the main stations. I'm going to take you downtown really quickly. So we have a TV tower. This is where we did our Bible seminar a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, actually. It's been a little bit now. But there is a TV. Oh, you can't see it. Oh, it's right there. It kind of looks like the Eiffel Tower right there. And if you look this way, right here, this building right here is also a Konkokyo building. It's the same religion. This is on the main strip. It's like an 8-story building. There's their logo right on the side. So this is something that you probably don't hear about in a comparative religions class. Konkokyo, like what is that? So definitely look into that. Another one is called Tenrikyo. Tenrikyo is a religion that also started in Japan in the 1800s. It's also an offshoot of Shinto, but now they don't really claim to be affiliated with Shinto. So if you look through the government book that I was showing you a minute ago, they talk about how originally they said they were Shinto affiliated, and now they say, not so much. So just to show you the prevalence of what their belief system looks like, let me oh, ten, my keyboard. I've got like 3 keyboards. Tenrikyo. Uh, so we'll do this. These are all of the Tenrikyo churches. That's what they call their gatherings. Tenrikyo church. There's tons of them everywhere. And as of a few years ago, it said that they had 1.2 million followers. So that's a lot of people that believe this. They were started in 1838, actually. And there's a lady who is the founder of the teaching. They have a main temple, and they think, they teach about a creator God as well, but not only like the only God, as in Christianity. And they believe that happiness is found in doing good for others. So they do that as well. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on in Japan that talks about these things, and they're like, hey, there's a creator, hey, let's help others. And they were really focused on, helping each other. It's a very poor time in Japan. So some of that. Now, we're going to move on to some of the later stuff. One more actually is called Soka Gakkai. Soka Gakkai started in the early 1900s. And Soka Gakkai is also very powerful. They have their own political party that has like 30-something seats, 30 or 40 seats in the Congress as well, the National Diet. They basically took off with the lower classes, and they have a lot of money. And about 30 years ago, they were very aggressive. And prior to that, they were very aggressive. They would do a thing called shikubuku, which is I've got the definition pulled up right here. Basically, the rebuttal of false teachings and thereby breaking negative patterns in one's thoughts, words, and deeds. So they were just like aggressively like attacking. What about this? What about this? You're wrong with this. So think of like your aggressive, super trying to be evangelistic people that that are trying to convert people. That's basically what they did. Now, they have since tapered off, and it's not as aggressive, but come election time, they're, passing out posters and endorsing their candidates. So that is definitely a thing that is still present here in Japan. Now, there is a another movement that happened in like the 1960s, 1970s called the Shinshūkyō, the new religious movement. And it gets confusing. There's the new, and then there's the new. It was a journalist who was writing a piece and talking about these new religions, and they were more focused on the next life, how to attain happiness. Japan went through a massive period of growth and development, and people, the people who were successful, they married well, they got a good job, they're doing well. It basically, you have the winners and the losers, and the people who were not on board with the winning, they were looking for other ways, and so they begin to offer, spiritual benefit. So there's one that was started in 1986 called Kofuku no Kagaku, or Happy Science. They have their own political party. They have never gotten anybody elected yet. But they're talking about their founder has this spiritual awakening, and they also teach that people don't just die and that's it. So, you can start seeing like little bits of spiritual insight that these people have, but they're just misguided. Another one is called Mahikari, Sukyo Mahikari. They believe there's like energy, and the way to happiness is to purify your spirit. They'll like put their hand, they think the energy comes out of your hand, and that's how someone purifies you. They also don't require to give up your other beliefs. And so it's very interesting how these things work together or branch are offshoots to do these teachings. So they're trying to fill this void in people's lives. Lots of these have 1 million, 2 million believers, 500,000 believers. There's a ton of adherents to these religions. And as you go about, you'll see their people. There's another one called Kenshokai. They're a Buddhist group. They don't technically have like a main teacher, but they are technically a lay Buddhist group. There's a founder. Okay, there's always money involved. They have their own newspaper. There's lots of money moving in these things. And when we were in Niigata, our previous city, there were a couple of times that my wife got invited by complete strangers, like, hey, let's hang out, let's be friends, and then like bam, they whip out their flyer and they start trying to proselytize. And it's they're there. They're out there. I've seen young ladies at that Kanayama station that I was showing you earlier. They were there passing out flyers. So a lot of these groups, they're based out of the Nichiren sect, because he taught his followers that they needed to proselytize and make converts, and they become very aggressive, and there's a lot of fighting. A lot of them are offshoots of each other, which is very interesting to study as well. But that is very much a reality in Japan. All right. Now, I want to talk to you about issues that churches need to address. I've got a question over from Instagram about are there more Japanese? We'll be taking questions at the end, so just give me a minute and we'll get to those. But if you think of something, just drop it on the comment section, and we will try to get to those at the end here. But I want to talk to you about practical issues that we need to face and deal with as we are surveying the religious landscape of Japan. And the first one is the idea of second-generation religious. This is becoming a hotter topic in Japan at large. It's called Shūkyō Nisei. And these are basically the children of devout followers or people who are involved in religion. So a lot of times they have a very negative bent towards beliefs. Like I've got a book. It's a manga, but it's basically says I was doing a religious cult, and it's basically a person who is an ex Jehovah's Witness, and their parents were in that, and it's kind of crazy, right? But they have a they're very spiteful towards their religious backgrounds. Think of it kind of like the people who are deconstructing their faith in the United States. There's other reasons that people do that here in Japan, but they walk away from these groups, or there's other groups, and most of the time, whether they consider themselves a lay organization or something else, there's a lot of money that is moving, and the children despise these organizations, so they will be going and saying, "Hey, these people, they took a bunch of money from my family, give it back." Even they are we were neglected as children because they were giving so much money to this organization, and we were basically faced abuse like that. And there's a lot of stuff that's going on like that. So as we survey that, we have to realize that, one, if you're coming to Japan, you have to have a proper understanding of giving, money, stewardship, and taking care of your family, right? In the New Testament, Paul talks about if you don't take care of your family, as they're talking about taking care of widows, if you don't take care of your family, you're worse than an infidel or an unbeliever. Put it this way, you could give all your money to the church, but if you're not taking care of your family, you're worse off than a crazy cult member. That's what the Bible's basically saying. And so there needs to be this balance, right? Sacrificial giving, stewardship of our time and talents and resources, but also taking care of our families. And we have to teach that through the scripture, the proper application of scripture and what that looks like. So this is a very touchy subject. You have to be careful when it comes to money, because people's assumptions are they're going to ask for money. They're going to be trying to get money. And people do understand that stuff costs money. So they'll walk in and immediately they start thinking, okay, that costs that much, that costs that much. And if your building looks super nice and you're using a lot of really fancy stuff, and they'll be like, where's this money coming from? That tends to be a suspicion that maybe older people that are more financially inclined might have. So you just got to be careful. Where's the money coming from? And so we try to make sure we tell them, because we're missionaries, we say we have a lot of churches in America that want people in Japan to know about Jesus, and they sponsor us. I don't call them support. I just say they sponsor this work. And they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Because otherwise they're like, there's 10 people in the room right now. There's 15 people in the room right now. How do you afford to pay for all this stuff? You must be ripping somebody off. That would be probably where their mind would go. So we just got to be careful with that. All right, the other thing is the themes that these other religious movements put front and center. Peace, happiness, some of them community, spirits, spiritual teaching. There is an element in these groups. They're like, a spirit told me this. I can speak to spirits. And, we would realize that's probably a demonic force. But people are drawn to that. This, you can heal people. You have these spiritual experiences. There are people in Japan who are spiritually sensitive. And so, as we think about this, think about how the Bible answers these questions. So as we talk to these people, as we engage with their faith, realize, Paul, when he's in Athens, he says, as some of your own prophets have said. So understanding where they're coming from and saying, well, the Bible actually teaches this. The Bible does teach a creator, but he's actually even more powerful. He knows you. The Bible is pro community. The Bible, God is pro happiness and peace. A lot of these religions will even be about trying to promote world peace. And we know that that is going to come one day through the gospel. And as King Jesus comes and takes the rightful place, that there will be true peace. But until then, there's a lot of struggling and suffering. So understanding what these religious movements are trying to do, this book that I was reading, this handbook, the one of the guys in there, he was saying, the area that I was working in, there's a lot of Buddhists, and there's obviously the name only people, but then there's people that actually believe the Pure Land Buddhism that is taught here in this area. And he said, at first I was like, they're of the devil and all this stuff. But then I realized that, if I could build bridges into their lives, connect with them, build trust, build friendships, and then begin to talk with them, not saying you're demons and you're terrible, but instead saying, like, getting this mutual understanding and saying, he said, eventually I came to think, wow, I'm surprised that somebody without the Bible, without God, without the gospel, could get this much spiritual insight. Obviously, they don't know the gospel, but they begin to talk about these things. And he says, this builds a connection point, a point of common interest, and we can begin to have a conversation there. And if I was understanding what he was saying correctly, he said, from there, that's when he started to see these conversions and people come to faith a lot more as they built these bridges and built trust. So this is a very huge aspect of doing ministry in Japan, is building trust, building relationships, and having those conversations. Now, if there's anything I could say about this, there's a couple other things. One, there's a lot more study that needs to go into this from Western minds. A lot of people have no idea that these religions even exist. And, if we're talking, this one's got 1 million, that one's got 2 million, that one's got 500,000, this one's got 1 million. There's a lot of people who adhere or at least are involved in these religious belief systems. So we need to make sure that that we understand who these people are and what they're talking about. People try to give me flyers for these things. I've seen their newspaper publications and mailboxes that they're passing out. I've had a lady try to talk to me when I was at a basketball court about trying to purify the energy in me. Like, she bought a necklace too. It was like $300. Okay, so I was like, how much did you pay for that? But that's just okay. That's where it goes back to money. But when it's all said and done, there's a lot of people who adhere to this. So when we interact with them, to know what we're talking about, I really think that colleges and missionary prep schools or future missionaries or even current missionaries, you would benefit a lot by looking into a lot more of these religious sects and cults that are in Japan, to know what you're dealing with, to know who you're talking to in Japan. But the other thing, on the opposite end of that, Japan has over 126 million people. So if we have a couple million here, a couple million there, that still leaves like 100-ish million people that aren't really practicing religion on a very strong day-to-day basis. Soka guy, others, they're like, you need to chant every day, you need to learn, you need to show up at our groups, all that stuff. Others, they're just name only. So on the one hand, learning about these religious sects, there is this element of like, wow, there's a lot we don't know. And then on the other end, there is this, yeah, well, there's a lot of people that just don't know and they don't care in Japan. And then also, these groups, some of them are very proactive in proselytizing. So don't let anybody talk to you and say, just leave Japan alone, they're not doing anything. There are groups here that are actively trying to get you to join their Buddhist group. Like, they're out there trying to make converts as well. So it's not something that only the Christians are doing. I know that a lot of atheistic people or people like that from Western views are like, stop forcing your religion on people. But I'm like people in Japan are doing that too, okay? So like, this isn't just a Christian Western thing. So calm down as we go forward. So it's a very interesting paradigm that we are dealing with in Japan. But people are seeking, people are looking for answers. I think maybe a lot more of the older generation, especially, we're talking like there was that second boom of like this in the 70s. There was an occult magazine in the 90s. And then the Shinshūkyō was putting ads in there, and they started another cult. They spread sarin gas in the subway system and killed a bunch of people. So there's this general like skepticism. The majority of Japanese people like religion, scary, suspicious, money, not sure. Ugh. So keep that in mind as you're going in and saying, I'm a Christian. They're like, oh, religion. Ugh. This is the background that we're coming from. And one final thought is that a lot of these religions, some of them are not so. So just to be clear, some of them are very much like, you must only be in our religion. We are the only one true way. But others are like, it's kind of like a sports club. You could be part of the basketball club on Tuesday, and you can be part of baseball on Friday. Like you just are part of different groups. And as we are evangelizing and discipling, making sure that people understand, no, Jesus says, I am the way. This being involved and committed to a local church, this is a one thing only. You don't get to select and pick and choose and cherry pick whatever you want, but Jesus says, I am the way. He says, abandon everything else and follow me. So, just a few concepts to keep in mind as you are engaging with people in Japan and preparing for coming to Japan as well. All right, so I'm going to go over here and look at the questions that I've got on Instagram to see what is going on and what everybody is asking. Are there more Japanese people becoming Christian? So it's interesting to note that the number of the Ministry of Cultural Affairs in Japan, they publish that 200-page booklet, and then they publish like a 3-page, like, okay, so here's what's different from last year. And the number of Buddhists and Shintoists is in decline. But the number of like religious stuff is like Christian stuff is slightly on the rise. Now, that being said, they classify Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, all those under Christian. So when they publish those stats, it's a little unfortunate because if you are like me and you don't believe that Joseph Smith really taught what the Bible says, then we have an issue with that. But I think that people are open and people are curious. A lot of people just don't know. All right. Now, what do you think? Why do you think more churches aren't sending missionaries to Japan? That is not a question that I'm qualified to answer, but I wish they would. And I think we need to prepare more people and make them aware that Japan is in need of more people. Addison, I'll be moving to Hokkaido. Can you name some places? Hokkaido's a big place, man. It's huge. So that'd be like saying, I'm moving to Texas. Can you give me a church? Hokkaido is the largest state. It's basically like a prefecture in our country. So I don't have enough information. Are the Japanese books you mentioned also available in English? Unfortunately, they are not. So this is an area where we need to see more research done. It would be more like as you get here and as you learn Japanese, these would be resources to look at. Are Japanese very family oriented? Are Americans very family oriented? Depends on where you live. If you're in the country, maybe a little bit more. Now, it's not. Before there was this idea of like, you got grandparents, parents, and grandchildren all living under the same roof. That is no longer the case. And so that is coming apart in more recent Japan. Are you located in Nagoya? Yes, I am in Nagoya. Please send us a DM. Are there Japanese traditions similar to the Greek and Romans that have echoes of the Genesis 6 incursion? I'm not sure what you exactly mean by the Genesis 6 incursion. Are you talking about Babel or what? But the there's let's see here. But I mean there's like in like Greek thought there's like the pantheon of gods. Um there's a pantheon of gods, there's different gods. They're not all omniscient, they're not all omnipotent. They are little gods, little g gods. Can you share more about religious beliefs among Japanese generation? I'm not sure I understand that question. Sorry. Japan is very much about work culture. Would showing that Jesus can give rest be a good way to introduce the gospel? It could. There's different approaches with different people. So again, I think a lot of times when we talk about these things, and I tried to highlight this today, when people say Japanese people are like, I published a reel the other day. I was on the train at like right after 6. The train was full. Okay, so they passed laws. This culture is shifting. This work all day, all night thing is changing. So I would be careful about making generalizations. But yes, I would say not just rest, but identity. I think Tim Keller was talking about if he could preach again. I know he's already passed, but he would talk about addressing this modern social issues. Even in New York, they're like people work, work, work. It's like you're working too much. But then eventually said, if I could go back and do it all over again, it would be about identity. Best advice on learning how to speak Japanese while in America. Search for YWAM, YWAM, Youth with a Mission. They have resources on their website, YWAM Japan Learning Japanese. Google that. All right. Yes, absolutely. Thanks for the clarification. Yep. So that is the end of those. I don't think I have any other questions over on YouTube today, which is very surprising. All right, LJ, how can we support you and your family? Oh, thank you. Wow, you want to pray for us or just send me money? I don't know. We are fully funded, so don't feel like you need to support our family financially right now. That might change in a year or so, but uh, you know, a lot can happen. If you are like, hey, we want to financially partner with you as our church or something like that, go to reachingjapan.com/give. Does your church do any ministry for hikikomori people? Hikikomori, that's another buzzword. They say that's like a million, but that's just like a rough estimate of numbers in Japan. And not necessarily. I think if you want to target social recluses, then there's a lot of rehabilitation and stuff that has to go into place. A lot of those issues, though, are family, and quite frankly, it's not just like you just target those people. And how do you target somebody who is closing themselves off to the world? That's kind of a that's kind of a tricky situation. So if you have any good ideas on that, let me know. But that's not our main target right now. Uh, but the rest verses have definitely been used as encouragement for many. Yeah. All right. Let's see here. What are some difficulties transitioning to living in Japan from the U.S.? Um, let's see here. Um, there are Yeah, I would say, that would be a different topic for a different time. That would be for cultural acquisition. So let's save that question for another time. Um, and it says there are presently more hikikomori than Christian. I've seen different numbers on that, and so it depends on which numbers you're looking at, I believe. But yes, people do say that sometimes. I mean, it's kind of hard to give a total accurate number. They say there's a million hikikomori, but a lot. I I'd be interested to see the actual like stats on that, because everything that I've looked at so far, everybody throws out a number, but then they don't have like a lot of data to back that up. There a lot of them are extrapolations. Oh, right. I think that is it. So, thanks so much for tuning in. If you have any further questions, send us a DM or shoot me an email if you already have my email. That would be great. And we would love to stay connected. The Japanese Mind, yes, that was also good. If you go to reachingjapan.com, we have a resources page. There is a book list on there. Those books are in English. I would highly recommend you reading those, because a lot of them talk about culture, change in culture, um, and that would be more the cultural side. Today we were talking about the religious aspect and the cults in Japan and just the spiritual awareness that people in Japan have. So definitely do keep that in mind as you are praying for Japan and praying about coming to Japan. I do want to let you know that our recon trips are filling up pretty quickly right now. So if you're praying about coming to visit for a 1 week recon tour, here's what you need to do. You need to go to reachingjapan.com/recon. The dates are on that page, the prices, everything you need to know for recon is on that page. And there's an application, fill it out. As long as you are a born again believer and you're actively serving in your church right now, you're probably going to be invited to come. And so, if God is working in your heart to go into more of like a full time capacity, or maybe spend at least a couple years in Japan, we definitely want to get in touch with you. But if you have any further questions, do send us a DM, and looking forward to staying in touch. So, thank you so much for watching today, and we will see you next time. Bye.